So I'm very happy and honored to be with you today amongst a distinguished panel who can talk about the business environment in Greece and Germany with great knowledge and experience. And in a time when the global economy, and especially Europe, is facing an unprecedented recession, it is more than timely to give the floor to knowledgeable representatives of the industry and listen to what they have to say, what they want to see from their respective governments and the EU. Germany, on one hand, is called to take bold steps and keep the Eurozone as intact as possible, while Greece is expected to face the highest recession in the Euro area. So this pandemic has also been a great accelerator by creating in just a few months' time the need for a new modus operandi for doing business and investment across Europe. And what we want to do today is to draw from the experience of Germany and Greece and have a discussion that aims to explore the response of governments, businesses, and the EU to the challenges and opportunities that have been created during the crisis. Together with us online is Dieter Kempf, the president of the German industries, or the voice of the German industry as BDI describes itself. Mr. Kempf has a long career from becoming a partner of Ernst & Young in 1989 to chairman of DATEV, which during his tenure, the company grew to one of Europe's largest IT service providers. From 2011 to 2015, Mr. Kempf served as president of BDI's member association, BIDCOM, while as of January of 2017, he has been unanimously elected president of BDI. Next to him is his counterpart, Mr. Dimitrios Papalexopoulos, who has been the CEO of Titan Cement since 1996. Titan is one of the oldest industrial groups in Greece, and he has been an executive of the company since 1989. Prior to joining Titan, he was consultant for McKinsey and in New York and Munich. Mr. Papalexopoulos is chairman of the board of the Hellenic Federation of Enterprises, and we are very honored that this is his first public appearance since his election. He's also the vice president of the European Roundtable for Industry and chair of the ERT Committee on Energy Transition and Climate Change. Next is Mr. Michael Tsamaz, who heads the OTE Group. It's the largest telecommunication provider in Greece and in Southeast Europe. He has been in its helm since November 2010, and he's somehow the link between the previous two speakers, having experience in the Greek and German industry, as OTE Group is part of Deutsche Telekom. Under his leadership, Mr. Tsamaz and the OTE Group have managed to streamline its financials, create new revenue streams, and transform into a modern customer-centric tech enterprise. And managing healthy financials have allowed OTE Group to implement a comprehensive long-term investment plan in fiber optic networks, mobile NGNs, ICT, advancing Greece's infrastructure. And the group is focusing today a lot on the new digital era, which we are very interested to hear from him, how the company will move to that era after the COVID-19 pandemic. I'm Hellenic. I'm a journalist with experience in EU affairs, and I will be your moderator today. But before we start our discussion, I will give the floor to Mr. Henry Bonnet, the director of Konrad Adenauer Stiftung in Greece and Cyprus, who had the initiative together with these two organizations and organized this event today.
Thank you, Hellenic. Good afternoon and welcome from my side to our online discussion on resparking the economy. It's a pleasure on behalf of the Konrad Adenauer Stiftung to organize this event together with the German BDI and with the Greek SEV. It's our first cooperation with the SEV, and I'm sure we will have, and I hope that we will have a lot more. It's a particular honor to have President Kempf from the BDI and the President Papalexopoulos participate as the keynote speakers. And especially I want to congratulate Mr. Papalexopoulos for his election and for agreeing to appear on his first online event as president here with us today. Thank you. At the same time, I am delighted to have Mr. Tsamaz from OTE there, of course, and last but not least, Mrs. Patricioti. Eleni, thanks so much for moderating. Let me just say that in our media, we can read every day about how much money our governments in Greece, in Germany, but also in the European level are taking into their hands in order to find solutions to the economic crisis we are faced with. It seems there's enough money to go around. If you look at the numbers, they are almost unbelievable. At the same time, we don't hear a lot about the companies themselves, and there's less discussion about the other side, the businesses, the companies, about their plans, what they think about the plans from the government and from the European Union, and what they're actually doing themselves in order to face the crisis, to save their companies, to make them competitive again, to take care of the workers, and also to contribute to the revival of the economy. That's why we're here today. I'm very much looking forward to the discussion. Thanks once again to all the speakers, and I hand the floor over to the moderator. Thank you.
Thank you. I wanted to say to the people, to our viewers, that if they have questions during the discussion, they will be able to send them in the Facebook page of Konrad Adenauer Stiftung or in the YouTube link that you're watching right now. So feel free to send questions, and hopefully we will have time to answer them as the discussion goes on. Now, I will start with Mr. Kempf. I want you to tell us a bit what have been the measures that the German government took during the pandemic to preserve its industrial sector, and have they been successful? If you can give us some examples and how these new technologies can advance the industry sector.
Yeah, thanks very much for the chance to give some insights from German industry or the German Industrial Association to the situation which we all are in now, and how German government and German industry try to solve current problems. I really appreciate the chance to be here with my co-panelists on this panel, and thanks to Konrad Adenauer Stiftung for organizing that. The coronavirus is a serious challenge for all of us, not just for business, but also for our societies as a whole. Companies are facing huge uncertainty about their production schemes, about their supply chains, about international transportation, about trade and demand, and there's a big uncertainty how to cope with the crisis, but what will be the new after the crisis? How can we proceed? The economic impact of the corona pandemic is enormous. Numerous companies and their workforces currently experience the greatest challenges since decades. And just to give you some examples from the side of German economy, since the lockdown at the, let's say, second week of March, the economic output plunged. In the first quarter 2020, the gross domestic product in Germany dropped by 2.2% compared to the fourth quarter of 2019. For the whole year 2020, we expect a drop down of 6.5%. And we as a BDI are on the almost more optimistic side. There are many more associations which believe that it's going to be worse. There are some positive signs right now. You might have heard about the GfK Consumer Climate Index, which was published today. It raises a bit compared to the last one, and also the IFO index, which is a very important index to get the psychological side of business raises again. German government has taken decisive action against the economic impact of the coronavirus with more or less two far-reaching packages of measures to protect jobs, to support companies. These packages include rules on short-term working, on fiscal liquidity assistance for companies, on a protective shield for businesses. Economic stabilization fund was put in place with a volume of 600 billion euros. Special measures for small businesses amounting to additional 50 billion euros. So an additional economic stimulus package of 113 billion euros. So we are using quite big figures right now. We are not just talking about millions, we are only talking about billions at that time. We are thankful for that reaction, but let us be true and clear. Euphoria would be self-deceptive, and we have to put a lot of actions in place. It's not just the money who will solve the crisis. We have to do much more, and I think what we have to do is invest in the right future technologies, in the right strategic economic areas. For example, strengthening the health market. We need a coherent approach, not just in Germany, but also in Europe. And that brings me in a minute to the European side for new energy-saving technologies. For example, the hydrogen market, for reducing green gas emissions and all that stuff. So let me talk a bit about the European side. I think all the 27 member states have been hit, not every one of them in the same manner. And we must acknowledge that the cohesion of the European Union is really being put to a test. Just to give you one example, the first reaction of all the member states when they had the coronavirus cases was closing the national border. I cannot take the reaction, but being 100% convinced European guy, I think it was the wrong measure to do, even if I can understand this kind of reaction, because the virus doesn't stop at national borders. It has hotspots somewhere. We now have one in Germany, but it has nothing to do with national borders. So we really have to think that we have to make this European Union strong. And we know that we will have to face substantial recession, even higher grades of recession in other European member states. So it's something we all have to solve. We have an issue with the so-called Green Deal. We have an issue with the recovery plan. The recovery plan of the EU has a lot of excellent ideas, but I think we have to mingle both. We have to merge the recovery plan with a clever Green Deal, not putting one in favor to the other. And that is something we just can solve together. No single European country can do that. And we should all not forget that right now it's correct to concentrate on the COVID-19 crisis. However, we have other economic crises on this globe right now. The tremendous economic fight between China and the US. We will just have a chance as a strong European Union to defend our place in this, I should not say game, in this situation successfully. So I'm looking forward to a fruitful debate with our panel. Thanks.
Thank you very, very much. I would go to Mr. Papalexopoulos, and I want to ask you if you share that feeling that Mr. Kempf explained about this euphoria that was created by all these measures that the German government took. I mean, do you also feel thankful to the Greek government for the measures that were taken during COVID? And do you agree that it's not about just the money? We will need more measures in order to get over this recession that is ahead of us.
Okay, thank you very much, Eleni, and thank you to Konrad Adenauer for this opportunity. I'm glad to be on board as well at a time where we are facing unprecedented challenges, as Mr. Kempf pointed out, but also I would point out with recently unprecedented unity within Europe between Germany and Greece. I think we're reading much more from the same page than in a long time. And that, in my mind, is in many ways encouraging, because starting from the end, if I may, from the points Mr. Kempf made, I think we're all committed Europeans, and the future of Europe at this point in time is at a very important juncture. Europe's position in the world is being challenged like never before from the US and from China, and together I think is hugely important. And I would like to particularly commend Chancellor Merkel for a very politically brave, but I think mature decision to take a big step forward, facing a lot of sacred cows in the German psyche for a long time and take a big and decisive direction towards to make Europe stronger for the future. And I think in my mind that's very encouraging. Now let me come back from that big picture to Greece. If we were holding this conversation just a few months ago, 3 or 4 months ago, we would all be much more optimistic. We have a new reform-minded government. We had good growth. And we finally had the beginning of a return of confidence in the economy becoming much more. Of course, COVID changes all that, and it changes particularly harder for Greece for 3 or 4 reasons, which I think have already been pointed out. First of all, because Greece is more dependent on tourism, and that has already been a harder hit. So proportionally, Greece will have a bigger hit. Second, because Greece does not have as much fiscal space, as much ability to spend as Germany, which had put its house in order. So even though money is available, we must fight that fiscal balance. We can't spend our way out of this completely, so we have to be careful. And finally, because after a decade plus of a very deep crisis, and with our GNP still about 20% below the previous peak in 2008, we have a weakened economy and a weakened private sector and a reasonably healthy but not very strong banking system. So we start from a difficult position. Having said all that, I think we should take at least a minute to celebrate the very successful first phase of facing the pandemic. We had a government that did things right with discipline, and we as a people also showed discipline in this case. And we've reached a point where internationally Greece is for a positive example in facing a crisis. And that, I think we should not underestimate the importance of that, both in rebranding Greece, as it were, from the last few years, restoring a sense of pride and confidence, which was sorely lacking, and I think is important in any country that wants to move forward. And I think these are preconditions for facing things going forward. And although I agree with Mr. Kempf's warning not to become euphoric, and in small parts of our society, I do get the sense of euphoria, which is probably unfounded. So I think we are going to face a very difficult economic reality. The first reactions from the government have been broadly in the right direction in our mind. First of all, protect the weak and take care of the pandemic and take care of those who rapidly found themselves without income, without a job. Now they're focusing more towards the liquidity aspects, the Greek equivalent of Kurzarbeit, which I think is a step in the right direction as well, and a number of other areas, protecting and taking as much as possible of the tourist season alive. I would invite all who listen to think about that. I think Greece offers wonderful opportunities at lower density of population this summer, wonderful to take advantage of. So maybe not to go too far away. I think maybe at the next opportunity we can say a little more about what the business sector might be doing, what our priorities is. But I don't want to go on for too long unless you want me to continue.
No, we're gonna go more specific during our discussion. I want to hear Mr. Tsamaz now, and your take. I mean, you are the CEO of a company that in few months had to move very fast. I mean, we saw a very quick digital transformation in the world and in Greece especially. And I wanted your take. I mean, do you share the view of Mr. Papalexopoulos that the Greek government took right steps? And what do you see in your company in the near future?
Hélène, thank you. I would like to thank the organizers of this for giving me the opportunity to be part of this panel. It's an honor to to be in the same panel with Mr. Papalexopoulos and Mr. Kempf, and I appreciate this. Hellenic, you have written a great book, which gave us a lot of insights of what happened during the critical years in behind the scenes. I think it's very helpful for fellow citizens. Anyway, let's go now to the current situation and the subject we're discussing. Definitely, COVID-19 it is a pandemic which disrupted our everyday lives. And for this reason, allow me to share our story and how we dealt with this crisis. In our group, in the telecom group, we very successfully transitioned to remote work, not in a few months, as you said, but in hours. Within 72 hours, right very early during the pandemic, 80% of our working force, which is approximately 13,000 employees, went remotely. And this happened only in 72 hours. At the same time, our networks, which were called to service not only our employees, but the whole country and every citizen who was locked down in his home, they experienced an unprecedented surge of demand. And what I can say, for which I'm very proud of, we were very proud of, is that we managed to respond flawlessly. And during these months, during this period of the full lockdown, we did not have any fault incidents whatsoever. Our networks, our infrastructure networks, both in fixed and mobile, responded and operated very well. In our company, we transferred also our customer interactions to our websites and to our smartphone apps. So we had 100% increase in our e-sales. At the same time, we had more than 50% on increase on various transactions. Now, if one asks, how did this all happen in a few days? No, it did not happen only in a few days. It was a matter of preparation of years ago. It was back in 2016 when we, in the telecom group, we set a new vision, which was following the transformation of the first years to go after a new vision, which was to establish a fully digital telecom company in Europe. And therefore, we had started preparing for digitalizing all our processes, and not only the internal processes, but also processes which have to do with dealing with customers and also partners or suppliers. Therefore, at the same time, we were investing in infrastructure networks. Therefore, when the pandemic happened, we were ready to service, and we were ready to respond to this demand. Now, in other words, the pandemic acted as an accelerator for our digital transformation. What is very important and very significant to note here is that at the same time, our government and the ministry, particularly the Ministry of Digital Transformation, was ready, was on alert and was ready to respond to all this and also to face this kind of difficulty. So immediately, they started launching various e-services. And this shows also the fact that the preparation had started earlier in the year, and that's why we were not much surprised by what we had to face. Now, regarding the other businesses, most businesses shifted to this new demand model, production model. They emphasized the online environment. Definitely the e-commerce in May grew very much, more than 100% versus last year. The students, the pupils, the schools went remotely. We had all this being conducted online. And at the same time, we saw new approaches to doing business. Common denominator on all this was the telecom infrastructure. it was technology, but mostly the telecom infrastructure, because without telecom infrastructure, this would have not been possible. In summary, for this first part of our discussion, I would say that all businesses will apply the lessons learned from this crisis long after it's gone. So we have things that we can consider as beneficial out of this lesson.
So from what you just said, I want to ask Mr. Kempf. I mean, Mr. Tsamaz just said in a very concrete way how many steps this Greek company had to take in order to cope with the COVID and the changing environment and world and the digital working environment that we are now all experienced this past months. And I wanted to ask you if there were any key innovative business responses in Germany, and how do you believe this effect could be amplified from the German government? I mean, do you feel we're going to move forward to a digital world, or we might go back to how things were? Or I'm curious to hear your response.
Yeah, thank you. I think if all of us which are not directly in the telecom business are really honest, must say that it was much, much better than we ever expected. Being a former Bitkom president, I know that very often the colleagues from the telecom side were punished with complaints or much higher expectations that they could fulfill. And this pandemic has really shown that our telecommunication networks work significantly better as expected. I mean, when we had some problems with our video conferencing schemes, it was more or less the user side, not so much the technical side. It was, where is my knob to mute my microphone, or where is my camera knob? So I think that is excellent, and I fully agree what Mr. Tsamaz said, that all business will benefit in the upcoming months and years from the experience we have made by using modern telecommunication media and means for their businesses. However, we have to be clear that digitization of industry is much more than doing successful video conferencing or using mobile telephony or using broadband communication schemes. And here, according to my experience, we still have to do some more convincing work, especially in the area of the German small and medium-sized enterprises. They are normally a bit reluctant when it comes to digitization. That's normally not their core business. They are technicians from a very hard stuff side, material management and all that. So there is some reluctance, and we clearly have to face that in some cases, coming to a modern digitization, that will mean investing money. And that's probably for quite a lot of them not the best point in time to invest more money, because they are exactly short of money because of the pandemic.
So do you think there are going to be steps forward, or because of lack of investment, we're going to go back to the way things were a few months ago?
That's one of my most important tasks, to convince our government that it would make sense to help to invest exactly in that area, not just for private business, also for the public side. I mean, we could do a lot by setting the goal. We want to be as good as the Estonian administration with our digital administrations. That would invest quite a lot of money, and that would make some of our tasks with the administration significantly easier. That was also one of the experience during the pandemic, because some of the administrative offices also went into home offices, but they didn't have their paperwork with them because a lot of the processes are still based on paper. So that's one of my main tasks, to convince government that it makes in enormous sense to ease investments exactly in that area.
And how is the convincing going? Are you optimistic?
I'm optimistic because quite a lot of our politicians felt that that's the right way, and some of the measures taken help to do that. Especially in the German recovery plans. So I'm optimistic to accelerate that.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Papalexopoulos, I guess there are many also German investors that might be listening to us at this moment. And I wanted you to address them and say, if there was a foreign investor, what would you count as strengths and weaknesses for the economy and for Greek business at this time? What would you say to somebody who wants to invest in Greece at this time? And if you share Mr. Kempf's also consideration that we have to move in this infrastructure, digital infrastructure, in the next years.
Thank you. In terms of investment in Greece, I'd rather be very practical rather than theoretical.
Mm-hmm.
Is that because of the crisis and the relative, we've done a lot of reforms as a country over the last 10 years, but we clearly have more ahead of us where we need to be in terms of the business environment. But we are much improved. There have been many successful German, both older and recent investments in Greece. I think the number I've heard is 6 billion over the last decade or so. And I would point out, instead of theorizing, on 5 or 6 sectors that in my mind could and should be interesting. One is we have good intellectual capital, which we don't fully utilize, and that's our problem. So in tech and IT, there are wonderful young people who present an opportunity. Daimler saw that when it bought TaxiBeat a couple of years ago. It's a successful example. There are other examples of companies that are setting up shop in Greece to take advantage of that brain power. Pharma has a number of opportunities. I believe Boehringer Ingelheim is expanding its capacity in Greece, mostly for re-export. Green energy is a huge opportunity. We're at the corner of the earth that has some natural advantages, and to the extent that by some calculations we'll have to over triple the amount of energy we'll be consuming as Europe, electrical energy, and most of it will be green. Greece offers a lot of opportunity. Waste and waste management, the circular economy, we're way behind. We need to catch up. Many opportunities there. Silver tourism, so retirement and what have you. Wonderful corner of the earth again. One could have argued a while ago, but will I feel safe there? Well, now we feel in some ways safer in Greece than we certainly feel in, say, New York. I'll keep Germany out of it. So there's opportunities there as well. Food and everything that's based on food and food processing, also some wonderful opportunities. And also in more traditional sectors, as Europe is looking to bring its supply chains closer to home after the trade tensions and everything, I think there are opportunities to look again at rethinking Europe's supply chains and bringing them somewhat close to home. There's a number of Greek suppliers, to say the automotive companies for example, in Germany, or other opportunities we could build on. If you put all that together, I think there is opportunity. One of the big challenges Greece faces is that the total investment is only about 12% of GNP. And that is way too low if we are to grow over time. Greeks have to invest, and they are investing. I think that's important. There's a number of sizable investments from Greek investors and companies. Having said that, there isn't enough money in Greece to do this alone. We need to attract foreign direct investment and to get that number up. And I think there are several opportunities like the ones I described, which one could look at.
Mr. Papalexopoulos, the opportunities that you described sound wonderful, but still, I mean, there's a lot of red tape in the country, and I wanted you to, as briefly as possible, if you have the Prime Minister in front of you instead of me, what would you give him, like 2-3 key changes that need to happen immediately in order to attract German investments or other investments?
I think the most important thing right now is to home front. As I said in my initial comments, we have a reform-minded government. Some reforms are painless, some reforms are tough, some reforms will take a lot of effort, and I think we need to avoid the easy answer of saying, well, in the middle of COVID crisis, we can't do reforms. On the opposite, we have to accelerate reforms. What those are I think so discussed that I won't bring anything new to the table. It's permitting, it's red tape, it's the speed of the justice system. So there's a number of things, and I don't think it makes sense to enumerate them one by one. I think we have a Prime Minister who understands very well, and we also clearly have a society and a public sector in Greece that, although it has been reformed quite a bit, is clearly still have a need for much further reform. So I think the most important thing is keep pushing for those reforms. We have a unique opportunity now to do it. So that would be one thing. The second thing I would point out, I would tell the Prime Minister is use the money that you will get, those 32 billion, if they end up being 32 billion, wisely. Don't squander them on small things. We have, let's put it politely, a not perfect track record of how we've spent money in the past. It would be useful if that money was spent in order, yes, alleviate the short-term issues because there's real pain, but also create the digital infrastructure, create the logistics and other infrastructure, and help along private investment and public investment. These were two things I would say: reforms and spend the money wisely to increase investment.
Before I go to Mr. Tsamaz, I would like to ask Mr. Kempf, as a German representing all these German industries, what the Germans face as problems when investing in Greece. If you could outline a few problems.
I don't believe that it was so much the point of view that there were problems investing in Greece. I think the reason why not so many invested money flew into Greece was that it was easier to invest it elsewhere. One of the things Mr. Papalexopoulos just said, the supply chain issue. I think that the last maybe 5 to 10 or even more years, a lot of our considerations when it came to supply chains was based on where is it cheapest. It was not, there were no other considerations. And I'm still favoring a rule-based global economy. So nevertheless, I think we have to use the experience we made during this COVID-19 crisis to rethink whether our multinational supply chain schemes were really favoring what we need as a combination of it must be cost efficient, it must pay for our sovereignty, which is something different like autonomy or autarky. Being sovereign is something different than try to be autonomous or be an autark state. So I think we have to redefine our structures and I would fully agree, which was said, that some of the pharma investments could also be done in other European countries. They must not all be done abroad. A lot of green energy solutions, whatever in whatever combination, could be done in other countries of Europe. So I see a lot of chances as soon as we consider more factors than just where is it at cheapest.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Tsamaz, I want to ask you more about what kind of digital service and infrastructure do you think Greek businesses need, and how fast can these services be provided? And also, if you can also give us your take on the key needed reforms that the Greek government should do to attract foreign investors.
Based on this discussion, I think we all agree that there is only one challenge ahead of us, and this is the digital transformation. Digital transformation does not mean that we create a website or install an ERP system. It means extroversion through e-commerce, IoT, Internet of Things, in other words, cloud services, enhanced customer experience through digital channels and big data analytics, and all these tools that digitalization offers us in order to be able to do our business addressing many markets away from our country, but at the same time understanding better the consumer and customer needs. So digital transformation is primarily a matter of mindset. According to research that we had conducted, SEV had conducted, 91 of the Greek businesses consider that digital transformation is a priority. But only 48% of them have a clear digital strategy. The rest, they have a confusion as to what it is. So most businesses out of this consider that digital transformation is the ERP and the CRM and some websites, which is these services or these are part of the third industrial revolution and not of the fourth that we're going through now. In terms of needs for the digital transformation, the number one need is the infrastructure, because without the infrastructure, we cannot really use the technology which is offered. What I can reassure any foreign investors or anyone who is interested in investing in Greece is that our networks are well advanced. We offer seamless services. In the past years, and even during the crisis, we invested more than 5 billion euro for infrastructure of fiber optic, fiber and 4G. For the next years, for the coming years, for the next 4 years, we have a business plan of investing more than 2 billion euros for fiber to the home networks and 5G. At the same time, we have a lot of integrated technology solutions which can help cities, municipalities, private or public companies in order to become more digitalized and start using various digital services. Now, from the government side, what is needed is, and I would say that this is already being addressed, implementation has started, the transactions between the government, the bureaucracy, let's say, of the state and the citizens have to increase. The more transactions we have that happen over the internet, over the e-channels, if I would say this, then the more that the businesses will be prompted in start being digitalized as well. I think we have the government and the ministry which runs this has this kind of mentality. They have started with various projects. They have quite a few significant projects that they have announced ahead of their plans, and I think we're on the right track. We have to be a little bit patient. However, there is the willingness there. From our part, there is the commitment for investing in the infrastructure and in the technology, the funds that are needed. So I would say that things look quite positive for anyone who wants to invest in the country and take advantage of this kind of technology. So for the Greek businesses, it's very important that every owner of a business, whether it's a small or a medium size or a large one, they have to realize that this transition to the digital age is very critical. They have to focus on the factors that they can affect, and they have to start being educated and grasp any opportunity in order to set up their businesses to be able to compete, to operate and compete in the future.
Thank you very much. I would like to draw your attention now to Europe's role in dealing with this whole crisis. And I want to ask Mr. Papalexopoulos if you believe that we are heading for a V-shaped recovery after the COVID, a U-shaped recovery, and is the EU doing enough in terms of funding instruments? We talked about the 32 billion that are for Greece in the recovery plan, if everything works out well and it's being approved by the leaders in the next weeks. And what are your expectations? I mean, Greece is going to get a considerable amount of funds. How should the Greek government use these funds?
Oh, I will not be drawn into making a prediction. That's a fool.
Okay.
It's nobody knows. There's so many unknowns, and I think at this point we're all preparing for all eventualities. The shape of the recovery, I think, we'll see how it plays out. There is no playbook for where we are today, so we need to reinvent many things and focus on what we can control. In my mind, we've covered, I think, most of your question already. I'm optimistic that the deal will be approved by Europe in some way, shape, or form fairly soon. I think the information we all have is that the Frugal Four are going to compromise. I think they raised some fair points, but I think they cannot stop this very important, and they don't want to. I think this very important step for Europe. So if this happens in some way, shape, or form, Greece will have 32 billion of amount of money, which needs, as we said earlier, to be spent wisely. At the same time, protecting the weak, making sure that the productive fiber of the economy, the companies and employees, which is already vulnerable from years of crisis, does not get destroyed further. But at the same time, not throwing money away at zombie situations, not trying to just plug holes, but invest in a way that helps the restart and sets the foundation for sustainable growth. So I think a lot of the money has to go to infrastructure for digital, infrastructure for green. A huge area which we haven't touched upon is a reindustrialization of Greece. We at the Federation of Industries have set a goal to see if the Greek economy can go from 10% industry to 15% industry, following Europe's lead, which is trying to go from 15 to 20%. That will have significant multiplier effect for all the economy and will provide more stability and better jobs. So going for an increase of the share of industry in the company, I think will also be very useful. And I was fully subscribed to Michalis's digital imperative. So spending the money, we've been given a big kick in the butt. We are taking advantage of it. I've been very positively impressed myself, and I will add that not just what OTE has done, but also with the Greek public sector. We have a big public sector that's far from perfect. We know that. That's one problem in the country. But in this case, they did a lot of things right, and we have to recognize that. So we have to build on that as fast as possible. We need to move a lot faster than we're moving.
Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Papalexopoulos. Mr. Kempf, I want to ask you, I mean, you said before in the beginning of our discussion that after COVID, I mean, we saw this fight of China and the US, and EU has to defend its place in the world. And do you think this whole crisis has made it clear to Germany how important is the European market? And is there a shift of viewing the world, let's say, in Germany? And also, what would you ask from Brussels to what measures would you want to see from Brussels for a quick recovery in Europe and in Germany?
I think we have to be honest with ourselves. It's not just only addressing Brussels, it's addressing each and every one of ourselves. We all must understand that in the economic world of tomorrow, no single European state, be it France, be it Italy, be it Germany, be it whoever, will play a significant role. The only chance to be significant in the world of tomorrow from an economic point of view is to be a united Europe. And this consideration was one of the reasons why my Italian colleague and my French colleague and myself issued a statement 2 weeks ago to make that clear. And maybe this statement, these three industrial organizations of the three European countries helped a little bit to find a compromise on the political European level for the recovery plan. I can understand some of the reasons of the Frugal Four and some of their arguments. And let me be honest, even in our German business community, there are some colleagues which are in favor of the arguments of the Frugal Four. However, our first goal must be we need a strong Europe, and we need a strong economy and a strong industrial sector in Europe and everywhere in Europe, and as a united Europe. So I fully underline what Mr. Papalexopoulos said. That must be the goal, and I really keep my fingers crossed that we will be able to reach a compromise on Brussels level, and on the decisive factor are the national government. So I hope they will come up with a compromise.
Do you feel there's a change in the German sentiment on, spending more money in Europe because Europe is our family and this is where we're going to sell our products and this is how Germany is going to be strong if Europe is strong? I mean, previous year during the financial crisis, it wasn't such a sentiment. Do you think COVID has changed that sentiment in the country?
I think it has changed some of the mindsets because we have to be clear that there is one significant difference between the financial crisis and the crisis we face right now. At the financial crisis, you could try to find your way and ask who was guilty, who has done things wrong, who was not prepared, who has not controlled, and all that questions. How do you want to put that question in the COVID-19 crisis? Who has created that virus? Who has called for the crisis? Who had not paid enough attention? Though from my point of view, that are totally different scenarios, these two scenarios. So that for me is an important issue, that we need a different solution and not the same arguments we had 10 years ago. Whether it's a change in the German political side or not, I know that quite a lot of people feel that it was changed. If it was a change, then it was a change in the right direction.
Okay, I like our conversation is very positive till now, so that's very inspiring. I want to ask Mr. Tsamaz, everybody is talking, both our speakers are talking about the digital transformation, and since you are the expert on our panel, I want to ask you, how do you see this digital transformation change our lives day to day in the next 10 years? And some express fear that they might lose their jobs. I mean, that being digital and everything will make many people lose their current jobs. And is that a consideration that one should have? And also, if you can tell us, what would you expect from the EU in order to facilitate this transition?
10 years ahead, so 2030.
I mean, in the next, let's say, maybe 10 is a lot, but maybe in the next 5 years.
10 years is not a long period.
Okay.
2030 may appear far in the future, but the reality is that the time to act is now.
Mm-hmm.
As far as I'm concerned, digital transformation is a great opportunity, and will give us will be the cause of many opportunities, despite its adversities. I think Greece can and should unleash a huge potential exploiting the technology and digital transformation. But for this, we have to all work together. All stakeholders, we have to create the infrastructure, we have to design the legal, the state has to design the legal framework and encourage instead of preventing. Society and businesses have to adapt to the digital culture, and so on and so forth. As far as the new generation networks, they are on the way, where companies are investing. So I'm quite optimistic about it. Now, in terms of what I would expect from Brussels, I would say that, and I would agree with Mr. Kempf and Mr. Papalexopoulos, we need a strong Europe. But in order for having a strong Europe, a strong united Europe, we need to have strong companies. In order to have strong companies, they need to be healthy financially. This cannot be achieved by over-regulation and over-bureaucracy. So if you ask me what I would expect from Brussels, I would expect to minimize bureaucracy, to minimize regulation, let the market dynamics, at the same time allow consolidation. Over-fragmentation of the various markets, of the various industries, creates small companies which are not capable in competing against the American or the Asian conglomerates. And this is a mistake that has been made by the European politicians, and as far as I'm concerned, it has to be corrected as soon as possible. Otherwise, European companies will never be able to compete against the Asians or the Americans, which means that if we don't have strong European companies, then we'll have a problem, and the problem will be very, very near us in terms of time. Mm-hmm. At the same time, they have to continue fostering digital culture with various programs, with subsidies, because it's obvious that technology has the power to fundamentally change not only the way we live, but also the way we work. For me, the most important thing is that Brussels will have to change the way they see the future of the companies in Europe.
Eleni, if I may interrupt, because I know we're running out of time.
I just wanted to, before Mr. Papalexopoulos, you interrupt, just if you want all of you to have a final comment, and because we are almost 1 hour in our discussion, and you can make your comment and also a final comment if you wish, Mr. Papalexopoulos.
Sorry for jumping in. I just wanted to complement what Mr. Tsamaz said, because I think one area we didn't touch upon in this call, which I think is hugely important for both Greece and Europe and Germany, is the reskilling we need to do, not only because of the digital revolution, partly because of the digital revolution. We have a huge challenge in front of us to have the kind of skills we need in the workforce in order to be able to prevent the question you asked initially, the unemployment. We find it increasingly difficult as companies to find the kind of people we need for tomorrow. At the same time, we have high unemployment in our societies. That is an unacceptable combination. It's a very big challenge. It's been discussed a lot around Europe, and it's an area we plan to focus on a lot more as well. because we think it's hugely important. And that's the last comment I would like to make, because I think it's that important. I don't want to detract from it by some other closing comment.
Mr. Kempf, do you share the same consideration that Mr. Papalexopoulos just said, that you have difficulties in finding the right people because the education that people get in Germany is not really connected to the labor market? Is that something that happens in Germany as well?
It's something which caused a lot of trouble the last years. And of course, right now it seems to be a bit different, because on one hand, we may face layoffs of people. On the other hand, we still claim that we do not get the right people for the right jobs. I think that's something that this is not a challenge which does not exist anymore, though it's ongoing and we have to face that. I also underline every word Mr. Tsamaz said about European competition law. That's something we really have to face. As far as it comes to competition considerations, we are still thinking like small national states. That will not help us. But let me make a final comment. What we all need is optimism. I know that the situation is bad, and I'm not blue-eyed at all. But we have the power to overcome that crisis if we do the right things, and if we do these right things together in Europe. And as far as I'm personally concerned, I'm very, very optimistic that we can do that.
Okay, thank you very much for your positive final note. And Mr. Tsamaz, also, do you find also difficulty to find people for this digital transformation that we're going through? And do you have any let's say, ideas that could help the Greek government to fight that problem if you face it as well?
Okay, we don't have difficulties to find people who are specialized in technology or in software. We are a technology and telecom company, so we are attractive to this kind of employees. I understand why this is difficult for other companies as well. Yes, this is a scarce resource, this kind of skills. However, my advice to the government would be that there has to be, the education has to start from elementary schools. We have our educational system, elementary schools, high schools, universities, they have to start preparing and educating young people with these new skills that economy will need and companies will need. It cannot happen from one day to the other. It's a long process. It needs long-term planning. Now, regarding the job positions that you asked, yes, technology causes some job losses, but at the same time, new opportunities are new positions are created. Historically, we have seen in every industrial revolution, jobs were being lost, but at the same time, new jobs were being created. So, as Mr. Papalexopoulos said, it's a matter of shifting our education, focusing towards this direction, and reskilling our people.
So you are optimist for the next year, let's say, that we will be quickly out of this crisis. We are going for a V-shaped crisis.
Yes.
Okay. So I will have to wrap up, and I really wanna thank all of our participants, Mr. Dieter Kempf, Mr. Papalexopoulos, Mr. Tsamaz, and of course, Mr. Bonnet, the director of Konrad Adenauer that organized this event today. I hope you got some great insights. I did, and I really want to thank you for all of your optimism in these hard times. So wishing for a more German-Greek interaction and collaboration in the coming years.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone. Mr. Bonnet.
Thank you, everyone. Good afternoon.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.